The presidential race, of course, is making all the headlines, but there are a lot of big races right here in our state. And to break all this down, a man who eats, breathes, all this stuff. KIRO Newsradio.
I hope not.
Matt Markovich.
I'll be dead. Yeah, so just kind of a quick analysis from my perspective, looking at all these races in the state, not so much the national races, but the state. You know, this Washington State's going bluer than ever. And this idea that there may be a supermajority in the House. I just went through the House and the state Senate. I just went through the results looking at where it sits right now, and there's no chance of getting a supermajority in the state House. Democrats needed to flip 7 Republican seats. Mm-hmm. The likelihood is that they can get 3. So every race is pretty much as predicted. So that supermajority in the House is not going to happen.
Off the table, huh?
Yeah, I'm going to take it off the table right now. But looking at the Senate, though, the Senate, the Democrats needed to flip 4 seats. There's definitely 2 they're going to flip, and 2 possibilities. Really, 1 other possibility. So they may come up 1 short on the supermajority in the state Senate. So just as if the race were to end today. But some of these races are 1 or 2 points separating them, and I don't see any other surprises, definitely in the House. Yeah. But the idea here in Olympia is that there's going to be more Democratic power in Olympia come January, and you're going to have a Democrat in the governorship. So a lot can get done. They're going to be able to get more votes. It's not like the Republicans have been muted forever, but this is really going to strengthen the Democratic majority.
I know in the past there have been some Democrats who actually were in the habit of voting with Republicans quite a bit, especially on certain fiscal issues. Do you have any people like that still there?
Well, it's kind of like those the transgender issues, or where the Catholic, the big issue last session was making priests accountable for abuse if it was heard in a confession.
Oh, right.
And a lot of people voted their religion there, where they went. It didn't matter whether they're Democrat or Republican. It's those kind of issues where it's happened. I really haven't seen where Republicans and Democrats. The Democrats don't need the Republicans at all.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So the supermajority thing would only be helpful if they're trying to pass a lot of constitutional amendments. But they're going to have a Democratic governor, so it should be smooth sailing.
And some tax issues. They'll be easier to pass tax issues. One thing I also want to point out, and we're talking about the initiatives, which a lot of people show an interest in, and we have the 3 of the 4 basically done. I think they haven't been called yet, but when you're at a 60% level, 66% level, it's basically saying those 3 initiatives that were brought to the ballot, they're going to go down to defeat and remain as is. But the one is that natural gas one. And I think it's a good rule of thumb for people to understand how King County plays a role in this. And I was told this by a political consultant, as well as Brian Haywood yesterday, who's the man who was behind the initiative. Mm-hmm. If a Republican gets 45% of any vote in King County, whether governor, attorney general, they can win the state. Mm-hmm. That's just the rule of thumb. And so right now, the natural gas ban is at 40%, meaning 40% of King County has voted, yes, we want to keep natural gas. Yeah. It's not quite 45. If they made 45, that would be passing. Mm-hmm. All the other initiatives in King County were the yes vote, which means repeal.
So natural gas could still go the other way, you're saying? Or
it's too close right now. Yeah. I mean, looking at right now, what's going to happen?
Even the Seattle Times, said pass it because they thought that the approach to natural gas was just too heavy-handed.
Correct. And I think it'd be interesting going forward when we hear this with the Trumpism you're talking about, where people are more, they don't want to be dictated to.
Yeah, right.
And whether Olympia is going to hear that in this state, that they don't want these rules dictated to the population here in Washington State, that Democratic feeling that you're going to be dictated to. Yeah. I want to point out one more thing, just what to expect for today. We have nearly 800,000 votes that came in the state they came in yesterday, but weren't counted. And you're going to have several 100,000 more added to that total today because all the mail-ins that were mailed in yesterday are going to be adding. So that 800,000 represents 15% of all the votes that went out, of the 5 million votes. So that's what's going to happen today. We had Yeah, as of yesterday, of the votes counted, the voter turnout statewide was 52%. They're expecting 80%. So
That's a lot of votes.
That's a big difference. So
Yeah.
they're expecting a lot of
What time is
mail-in.
that released today?
So what happens is each county can pick their own time when they want to release, and it tends to be about between 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. Each county makes what they know as a dump. Whatever ballots they have on hand, they'll count today, and then release the results 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon. And the same thing will happen tomorrow and the following day until we're down to 0.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you notice if you go on the website is the large number of challenged ballots,
Right.
because the signatures don't match. I heard that I forget if it was with respect to our own state, but that younger people who don't learn, cursive writing anymore have never really developed a signature, or they sign forms online, which really screws up your signature. And if that becomes your official signature on the registration form, it's almost impossible to match it when you sign your ballot unless you've kept a copy so you can remind yourself, because they sign differently every time.
So of all the signatures out there, you're exactly right. Signature does not match is 95% of the challenges right now. Nothing with the election observers that they spotted something that was unusual, which they can ask a complaint to the elections office about. So it's all about signatures. And in case you're wondering, Adams County is leading the pack here. They have almost 3% of their ballots are being challenged right now. So it's a small county, but again, lots of votes to count. There's some narrow races in the state Senate and the House still to be decided, but that supermajority in the House not going to happen, which I've been talking about for quite a while. And the Senate, it still could happen.
I'm curious though about that, because when somebody mentioned that there's actually a generational divide, and because it's true, they don't teach cursive anymore. Is this going to become a bigger and bigger problem? Because if your identity depends on an unreliable signature, and then you have to have these, phone banks of people calling up thousands of voters saying, come down. You have to go to the county headquarters, right, to correct this. That's a hassle. Don't you risk disenfranchising? Chris, you want to?
Yeah, we had to do that with Tommy.
Yeah.
Because they tried to match his signature from his original driver's license and his original registration. Well, he's then since changed it. Since he went away to college. So in his first election back, his signature didn't match, and we had to write a letter, and then he couldn't, because he was in Bozeman, so he couldn't. So 2 years ago, it didn't get resolved, but we resolved it over Christmas. But he had to go in and give a new writing sample and say, hey, this is my new thing, and then they put it on file. So it happened. I mean, I can imagine that happening to a lot of high school kids who are gone away, and then their ballot is like, oh, and then what do we do about it? Because we're not in our county where we're from, where we're registered. So, but yeah, so that was a huge hassle.
I'm told that before we had mail-ins, we're an all mail-in state here, and everybody's signature is on file at the elections office. We had to go into the precinct and sign your name, right?
You did.
And back then, so those signature challenges were a lot higher than they are now, because they had to take those rolls, go back to the election office. Did Matt Markovich's signature match when he went into the precinct? So it took a lot more time. So we're in a very efficient area right now, even though with 2%, 1.5% total ballots being challenged, it's very small compared to what it used to be.